What's up, everyone? Hockey Time here, back for your weekly dose of NHL Power Rankings. Hope you guys are doing well. Apologies in advance if you can hear my dog in the background. She's going a little rogue in the setup here, but that's all good. Hope you guys, again, had a good week. We are into the last week of Power Rankings before the NHL trade deadline. Of course, next week, by the time the rankings are up, it'll be a day after the deadline of the trade deadline. So we'll have seen all the moves. We've already seen one big one, of course, in the Chris Tanev trade. We have the Elias Pettersson extension coming out today. We have Evgeny Kuznetsov going on waivers today, so stuff is definitely starting to move with regard to various roster transactions, right? So we'll see what else comes of that. But for this week, let's jump right into the power rankings, what you guys are here for. So number 32, it's not the Coyotes anymore. Back one spot is the Chicago Blackhawks. 0-1-1 on the week. It wasn't the worst week for them, but the Coyotes got on the win column. They did not. They haven't been good as of late or all season. So as a result, they fall back to that number 32 spot. Not really too much else to say for them. Number 31, also falling a spot, is San Jose. They go 0-3 on the week. It was a pretty rough one for them. They also fall to the Ducks, which is like the battle of the basement in the Pacific there. So good for them, I guess, for their draft lottery standpoint, but not good from a result standpoint. Resultingly so, they fall also below the Coyotes to number 31. They're 2-7-1 in their last 10. So they've at least collected a couple of wins, but beyond that, not really too much going well for San Jose. At number 30, moving up two spots, are the aforementioned Arizona Coyotes. They finally get a win against the Ottawa Senators last night. It was not pretty. They almost threw it away after having a 3-0 lead, but they get it done. It was a 5-3 win. It's like their first in 12 games or something like that. It was not good for them, but they got it done finally. It wasn't going to take a lot for me to bump them above the two previous teams here. I think both Chicago and San Jose are like 1 and 2 for the worst teams in the league. They're going to end up with the best draft lottery odds. So I think they kind of belong there. Arizona's still not good by any stretch of imagination, but I think good enough to have them back above at least the two true bottom feeding teams in the league. Number 29, also dropping one spot. And this team hasn't been great as of late, really, over the last couple weeks. They've steadily fallen like a spot at a time. It's Montreal. Montreal goes 1-1-1 on the week. They are 2-7-1 in their last 10. Just has not been good enough to keep them above that kind of like middle of this bottom row that I had been saying that they kind of belonged in all year. Again, apologies for the dog if you guys can hear all that, but yeah, they just been steadily kind of falling off. Again, not the worst thing. They're not meant to be a playoff team. They're not really meant to be in the race. So the fact that they're keeping their games competitive is fine, but the results in general just have not been there. And for that reason, they had to drop to number 29 here. Number 28, and this team moves up a spot for what feels like the first time in a little bit. That's Columbus. They go 1-2 on the week, but of course, their only win comes against the New York Rangers, which is one of the top teams in the league, right? So it's a big win for them. They're 4-6 in their last 10, so it has not been a terrible stretch for them. And again, a big win like that against New York is always going to help a team a lot, especially in this bottom part of the power rankings. I know they also lost to the Rangers later in the week, but the Rangers are a team that should be beating them pretty much every time they play them. And the fact that Columbus snuck a win out there is pretty good. So that's the reason they move up this week. Number 27, they stay in the same spot as last week. 1-1-1 on the week as well is Anaheim. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. And of course, their lone win coming against San Jose. So it wasn't really grounds enough for me to move them up the ranking, but a win's a win. It keeps them from falling below Columbus. Not really too much else to say about this team other than it's going to be an interesting week for them. We'll see how many trade pieces they send out the door. Is John Gibson going to be involved? Is Adam Henrique going to be involved? I know there's been rumors about Trevor Zegras. I don't really expect to see him move at all, but we'll see what happens there. So interesting week coming up for the Ducks for sure. As far as the rankings go, they stick at number 27. Number 26, dropping 3 spots, and this is a team that had a promising last couple weeks, so a little bit disappointed to see them fall. But it's the Senators. They go 1-3 on the week. They're now 4-5-1 in their last 10 after a decent, again, stretch in their last 2 weeks. Wheels totally fell off this week. They lose a really bad game to the Coyotes. It looked terrible after the first. They bring it back in the second and then just, once again, unable to hold it together in the third. The goaltending has been brutal. Of course, Anton Forsberg in the game against the Coyotes, again, didn't have a backup goalie, so he kind of just had to gut it out, and it did not end up going very well for him. But in general, the goaltending just not there for the Sens. You can see the frustration coming out in guys like Stützle, Kachuk, Batherson, Drew, like all of their leaders that you expect to be producing a lot. Very visibly frustrated, especially again, referencing again that game last night against the Coyotes. So we'll see what all happens for the Sens. I don't know how much I expect to see from them in this coming week before the trade deadline. I do think Vlad Tarasenko will probably be moved, but I don't know how much beyond that is really going to happen for these guys. I think it's going to be much more of a busy offseason than it is going to be a trade deadline for their front office. But we'll see what happens there. Not a good week for the Senators. They fall 3 spots to number 26. Number 25, they're 2-1-0 on the week. They're the beneficiary of Ottawa falling, and that's the New York Islanders. They did have a couple of big wins. I struggled with them and the team in front of them as far as who should stay ahead of who. The Islanders taking down Detroit, notably this week, one of the hotter teams in the league as of late. They take care of them on, I believe, Thursday night. So a big win there. They're still alive in the playoff hunt. For that reason, they end up moving up a spot along with the Senators falling down a bit. Number 24, also moving up a spot again. And this is the other team where I was kind of bouncing back and forth on who should move up. And I decided that Buffalo deserved to be just a touch ahead of the Islanders. I know the Islanders are a little bit further ahead in the standings, but I felt like the wins for Buffalo were higher quality wins than those for the Islanders. They take down the Hurricanes in overtime, and then they also take down Tampa Bay, who, like a lot of these teams, fighting for their playoff lives here. So pretty impressive stuff there from the Sabres. I wish we could have seen more of this early in the year because maybe they'd be fighting for a playoff spot themselves. I know they're not statistically eliminated just yet, but I don't really think they're getting there. But it's been good to see them play well lately. They have been playing pretty well again. 6-4-0 in their last 10 this week. Just another slightly above average week for them, which could have gotten them somewhere if they started the year like that. So good to see that from the Sabres. They move up a spot to number 24. Number 23, also moving up one spot, kind of a similar spot to both the Islanders and the Sabres, is Washington. They're also 2-1 on the week, 6-2-2 in their last 10. It's been a decent little stretch for the Caps. They've been keeping their playoff hopes alive, most notably with a massive win last night against Philadelphia. That was an absolute must-win game, both for them and for teams like the Islanders, teams like the Lightning, even keeping them out of that wild card spot. The Penguins, like all these teams in the Metro that are kind of in the mix for, I know Tampa's not in the Metro, but the other Metro teams, keeping them alive by keeping Philly from really extending that gap. So a big win for them, keeps their individual playoff hopes alive, and they've been playing decently lately. 2-1-1 on the week is not the best, but definitely good enough to at least keep them in the race for the playoffs. So good to see that from my guys. Again, one spot up to number 23. Number 22, this team stayed in the same spot despite a 2-1 record, and that's Seattle. 5-4-1 in their last 10. One of their two games against Pittsburgh. So again, the Penguins have been struggling a bit as of late. We'll talk about them momentarily, but a good win there for Seattle. Much like some of these aforementioned teams, they're not quite dead in their respective playoff race yet, but they definitely have to make up some ground. And there's one team in particular in the West that is cruising up both these rankings and the standings that is going to be tough for teams like Seattle to catch. So we'll get there in a couple minutes, but for now, Seattle, the same spot as last week at number 22. Number 21, and they drop a spot, and that's the Pittsburgh Penguins. Again, they travel out to Seattle. I know that's a tough, cross continent game, right? They're on a road trip here, but in general, that's a game you at least have to put up some fight and get a goal in, and they get blanked 2-0. That's a really tough game for a team that, again, like these other Metro Division teams fighting for their playoff lives, there should not be a single game the rest of the year where they get shut out. It just shouldn't happen. You have guys Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Gensel, Carlson, like you have so much talent. I know older talent, but talent on your team. You cannot get shut out in a game like this against a kind of mid team that you should be beating if you belong in the playoffs. And of course, they don't do that. What that says for their playoff qualifications, if you want to call it that, I'll let you guys decide that for yourself. But in general, not a great week for the Penguins, despite the 2-1 record. It should really have been a 3-0 week for them. Not able to do it. 4-5-1 in their last 10. They drop one spot to number 21. Number 20, flip-flopping with Pittsburgh, is Calgary. Unlike the Penguins, they do go undefeated this week, 2-0, 7-3-0 in their last 10. It's been a good week for them, of course. We'll see if they can maintain it. Much like Pittsburgh, Calgary has a tendency to be very back and forth. We'll see how their guys react to the Tanev trade. I know Markstrom had the interview where he kind of stated really upfront, blatantly, that he was not happy with the whole trade situation. I think he wants to be on a team that's winning, that's contending. And of course, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen unless Craig Conroy is just trying to play some mind games with the GMs that he's currently negotiating with. We'll see, I guess, by next Friday whether or not that's the case. But for this week, it was a good one results-wise for Calgary. We'll see what the Tanev trade does to the team, what the mindset of guys like Markstrom, Hanifin does for them. But in general, a good week. They move up to one spot to number 20. Number 19, and this is one of the bigger droppers of the week. There wasn't a ton of movement this week. Full transparency, if you guys want to stop watching now, skip to the end. whatever floats your boat, right? But dropping 3 spots, one of the bigger droppers is St. Louis. They go 0-2-1, 4-5-1 in their last 10. And again, a team that's in the mix in the playoff race, you cannot afford to drop stretches of games like this, and that's exactly what happened. 2 of those games were against teams that they're chasing in the race, so just not really the results you want to see if you're a Blues fan. I don't think I expect this team to end up climbing back in and making it again. There's one Central team in particular that's been very good, and I just don't know that the Blues are going to have a good enough time catching them. So for that reason, they drop a few spots to number 19. Number 18, another team that they're chasing is Minnesota. Minnesota 1-2 on the week. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10, and that decent stretch of good play is kind of what kept them above St. Louis. I do think that they're just marginally better than the Blues right now, despite the fact that the results really weren't there for them either. I would like to see Minnesota make it. Don't get me wrong. I think this team belongs in the playoff with the talent they have, but just numbers wise and math wise, it really doesn't look great for them. And again, the teams they're chasing have just been playing quite well. So we'll see if they're able to do it this week. Definitely does not help that. You cannot go below 500 when you're looking to chase down a team that's currently in the playoffs when you're not. That's just never going to work out in your favor. So hopefully next week they can rebound, but for this week they stick to number 18. Number 17, and this team moves up 2 spots despite a really tough loss on Friday, and that's New Jersey. They go 2-1 on the week. They should have been able to move up faster than this, but that loss against the Ducks, man, is such a tough one. They put 55 shots on Lucas Dostal. It seems like this guy loves playing spoiler, right? He always has these fantastic games against these really good teams, and the night against New Jersey was just another one of those. They bring it back to within one. They have the Jack Hughes opportunity on the penalty shot with 2 seconds left in the game and just not able to bury it. Anaheim is a team that really any of these teams fighting for a playoff spot should have no problem with. And I know they outclassed them. I know they outshot them 55-23 or whatever it was. But at the end of the day, the 2 points are all that matters, and they did not get either of them. So a really tough game from Jersey. They probably should have been in the top 2 rows this week, but blowing that game against the Ducks does not help them. For that reason, they only move up the 2 spots to number 17. All right, into the top half here, moving up 1 spot is LA. They go 2-2 on the week. It wasn't great for them, but again, they're in that top wild card spot for the time being. They can kind of coast along as long as none of these teams go on really wild stretches of winning, 4 or 5 games at a time while the Kings are only going 500. Then we can talk about whether or not they have to worry. But right now, I'm not overly worried about them. I think they have the roster to be fine. I'll be very curious to see if they make a move for a goaltender in the next week. Again, Craig Conroy said Markstrom's not going anywhere. We'll see if a guy like UC Saros becomes available. If one of Detroit's 3 goalies becomes available, I don't really think that's going to be the case. But in general, good stuff or good enough stuff from the Kings. Be very curious to see what they do before the deadline in this week. But for now, up 1 spot to number 16. Number 15, and this team drops a spot, and it could have been 2. I kind of battled with myself back and forth on whether to have LA or Philadelphia at number 16, but Philly went 1-3 on the week. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10. I just didn't quite feel like I was comfortable moving LA above them. I think in general, Philly does a good job of staying in the fight. That game against Washington was tough, though. You have a 2-0 lead after the first. This is a team that you expect to clamp onto that. They've been pretty solid defensively all year, one of the best penalty kills in the league. They don't need a ton of goals, but Sam Ersland just did not have a good night. This is another team that I don't know if I expect to see a move for a goalie at the deadline, but I wouldn't be shocked if they make one. Of course, Sam Ersland was not projected to be the starting goalie come the end of the year. Granted, Philly was not expected to be in the playoff race by the end of the year, but here we are. So we'll see what happens for them. It was not a great week. I do expect them to bounce back next week, considering Torts is behind their bench and they have all year seemed to find a way to do so. So we'll see what happens for Philly. Not the best week from them, but only dropped 1 spot to number 15. Number 14, another team dropping a spot despite a pretty solid week was Tampa Bay. They go 2-1-1. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10. Frankly, the only reason that they dropped was because another team had a really strong week, and I could not reason myself into keeping Tampa Bay above them, and that was the Nashville Predators. The Preds, again, in the mix in the playoffs, they sit in that second wild card spot, I believe, just behind LA at this point. 4-0 this week. They are 8-2-0 in their last 10. They have kicked it into high gear. They know what they're fighting for. They know that once you get in, anything can happen, and they are showing that game in and game out. UC Saros has been really good. We'll see if anything happens with him before the deadline. This puts Barry Trotz in a really, really tough spot. I mean, you have a team that's in a playoff position, do you really want to sell off your starting goalie who carries your team through a ton of games? I know they have Yaroslav Askarov in the AHL. I know how good he's been, but that feels like a really, really risky move to make if you're Barry Trotz, and it's kind of a slap in the face to your players that have gotten you here if you do make that move. So we'll see what happens for Nashville. Going to be a really interesting week transaction wise, but results wise, this past week it was very solid. Kind of hard to not move them any higher, but there's some really good teams in this top 12. So I think 13 is okay for now. We'll see what they do next week. It's going to be a really interesting one for them. The Preds up 2 spots to number 13. Number 12, I know these fans aren't going to be happy, but they drop another spot, and it's Vancouver. 1-1-1 on the week. They're now 4-5-1 in their last 10. It's been a tough 3 weeks for the Canucks. Frankly, just other teams in front of them that I didn't quite feel comfortable moving them up to. The biggest news for them is the Elias Pettersson signing. That's huge. 8 years. He's locked in. Canucks fans should be very, very happy about that. Again, I don't really think going anywhere in the playoffs. They are still tied, I think, for first in the league in points, if not 1 point back of like the Panthers and the Bruins. So they're not going anywhere. They're going to make it into the playoffs. We'll see how far they can make it. I would like to see them kick it back up a bit. There's kind of this like common tendency, right, of teams that have really strong first 2/3 of the year, first 3/4 of the year, and then kind of float into the playoffs. And they're just not as hot as some of the teams like Florida last year, who had to fight for their lives getting in, and then they just kept that momentum going. So I'd like to see the Canucks kind of kick it back into gear. I expect Talkett will be able to get them to do that, but for this week, just not quite enough for me to keep them at 11 or move them up. So they fall to 1 spot to number 12. Number 11 this week, and this is another team falling. It's actually the biggest fall of the week, 4 spots for Vegas. Vegas 1-1-1 as well, also 4-5-1 in their last 10. The other teams in front of them just kind of leapfrogged them in pretty much every respect. So not really a knock against Vegas. I know dropping a team 4 spots feels like a knock every time, but I think the other teams ahead of them are just performing ever so slightly better. They are pretty banged up. They're still without Eichel, without Mark Stone, just getting Shea Theodore back. Had a couple games this week where the goaltending wasn't all that great. So not the worst case scenario for Vegas, right? They're going to make the playoffs like these other teams. They'll be able to kick it in the high gear. They found a way to do that every single year. So not worried about the Golden Knights, but could not keep them in the top row for this week. So they dropped 4 spots to number 11. Number 10, and this team stayed in the same spot despite much deliberation from last week, and that's Dallas. Dallas goes 2-1-1. They're 4-3-3 in their last 10. They had some really good results this week, but just not quite enough to really like force my hand to move them up, right? Some good Central Division matchups this week in general. The Avs took care of the Stars. The Stars took care of the Jets. The Jets took care of two other teams. I'm blanking who they played, to be completely honest, but in general, it's this weird kind of like love triangle in the Central between the top three teams. And despite all that, I didn't quite feel comfortable moving Dallas above the Avs, who's the team in front of them. That stays the same as last week, too. Both these teams were number 10 and number 9 last week. They're number 10 and number 9 this week. Just decent enough records. Again, 2-1-1 for Dallas, 2-1-0 for Colorado. Dallas 4-3-3 in their last 10. Colorado 5-4-1 in their last 10. So flirting with 500 over the last 2 weeks. Again, both these teams are perfectly fine spots. They're all going to make the playoffs. Just kind of a matter of working out the seeding and seeing what happens from there. So for both these teams, just kind of meandering their way in, which I think is okay. They're going to end up playing one another, though. So take that with a grain of salt, I guess. If one of those teams gets hot, look out for the other one. But for this week, same spots at number 10 and number 9. Now, into this top row is where things get a little bit interesting because at number 8 is the biggest jump of the week, 4 spots up to number 9 for the Detroit Red Wings. Detroit 3-1-0 on the week, 7-3-0 in their last 10, and they are seemingly last year's Panthers. They are warming up at the perfect time, and once again, it's Alex Lyon backstopping the same team doing it. So a little bit of a coincidence there. He seems to thrive under pressure, which is great. You love that in a goalie. But offensively, this team's been kicking it in high gear as well. They really kind of look like they're back into that same form they had at the beginning of the year, except they now also have Patrick Kane, which is not a bad benefit, right? So very curious to see what they do at the deadline. Stevie Y is notorious for being very quiet, keeping things under wraps. So we won't know until the second it happens if Stevie Y makes a move, but be curious to see what they add or really how much they add to this roster, because I think very safe to say this rebuild is done. This team seems for real. We'll see what they want to add. I think a defenseman would probably be a good bet for them. Don't have a full confidence in their blue line, but it's been good enough lately. It's gotten them into this top row, so they move up 4 spots to number 8. Now, number 7 uh, moves up one spot as well. Another one of those Central teams. They're 2-1 on the week. They're also 7-3-0 in their last 10, and that is the Jets. The Jets really kind of like the Avs and the Stars. They can all kind of just walk their way into the playoffs. They're going to end up the top 3 seeds in the Central, barring Nashville continuing this crazy run. It's just a matter of who falls where in regards to seeding. You obviously want the top seed in the Central because if not, it's going to be a battle of 2 juggernauts going like that for 7 games, which is going to be great entertaining hockey, but you don't want to be one of those 2 teams involved because obviously you have a decent chance of losing. And if you win, you're going to be pretty banged up and tired because it's going to go 6 or 7 and it's going to be physical. So right now, the Jets are in good shape to be the team that dodges that matchup between one of the Avs or Dallas. They had a pretty solid week. Again, they can kind of afford to lose some games. They go 2-1, not quite flirting with 500 the same way the Avs and the Stars have been, so they stay just above them at number 7. Number 6, and this team drops a spot. They may have deserved to drop 2. I wrestled with this one a bit as well, but it's Boston. 1-0-2 on the week, so they maintain their point streak, but 3-2-5 in their last 10 for the Bruins, and they had that stretch of like 6 or 7 games in a row going to overtime, and they snap it against Vegas, which weird team to finally win a game in regulation against, considering you guys probably both want the point, but whatever. They continued the point streak, which is what's important to me here. I don't want to punish them too much because despite the fact that they have not been winning a lot, they have been collecting the points, which is important. They're still one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league points wise. So didn't want to punish them too much. I still feel like I favor them over the Jets. Still feel like I favor them over a team like the Red Wings, right? So that's my kind of like validation for why I still have them as high as I do. I know I'm going to get some people in the comments disagreeing with that, and that's totally fine. I just felt like it was not quite enough just yet for the Bruins to fall too much. Now, if this goes into next week, they're definitely going to drop probably out of this row. But for now, just wasn't quite comfortable dropping them below a lot of these teams. So that's why they still sit at number 6 despite the losing record. Number 5, and this team moves up one spot thanks to Boston, largely is Toronto. Toronto does go 2-1 on the week. They had the loss to Vegas. They come back, though, against Arizona the second time they played them in a week as well, and they win that game pretty handily. Joseph Woll looked really solid in that one. This team's 8-2-0 in their last 10. They're humming at the right time. Interesting move for Ilya Lyubushkin. We'll see what happens there. I don't think he's really the piece that solves the Leafs' problems whatsoever, but if you need a righty, you need a righty, I guess. I don't know. Good week results wise, though, from the Leafs. Austin Matthews still firing away. If Joseph Woll can step right back in and continue to play in stride to the way he was before he left, this team's going to be very dangerous going into the playoffs. So good stuff in general from Toronto. Leafs fans will be happy with this one. They move up one spot to number 5. Number 4, and the top 4 really does not change all that much. Number 4 is New York. They would have moved up to number 3 if they did not lose to the Columbus Heavenly Blue Jackets. Like, that was a baffling game. I mean, this is a team that just outmatches them in literally every single position, every single line, go all the way down the depth chart. There's no way the Rangers should be losing to the Blue Jackets, and they deserved to be number 3 this week. But I was not moving them up a spot after losing to the Blue Jackets because the team in front of them, the Edmonton Oilers, also goes 2-1, and they did not lose to the Columbus Blue Jackets. So no movement there. Kind of a tough loss for the Rangers. They're still 9-1 in their last 10. They've been playing fine, but I was not going to benefit them enough to move up a spot or 2 when you lose to a team like that. It's just never going to happen. It's the same realm as losing to San Jose, to Chicago, to like those losses just cannot happen. I know they're safely in a playoff spot. You can kind of put it on autopilot at this point of the year for them, but just wasn't going to let it happen. They stay at number 4 for Edmonton. Again, same record. They are 5-4-1 in their last 10, so not nearly as hot in general as the Rangers have been, but getting the wins they need to get. They're not quite in that same spot because of the hole they dug themselves. They're still second, I believe, in the Pacific Division. They could catch Vancouver. They have some work to do if they want to do that, but I think it's obviously to their benefit because if they don't, they probably face off against Vegas in the first round, which, like the Central matchup, would be an absolute dogfight. So Edmonton definitely still looking to push through and try to make up some ground on the Canucks if they can. The Canucks are giving them room to do it, so we'll see whether or not Edmonton capitalizes. But this week, not good enough to move them up, not bad enough to move them down, so they sit at number 3. Number 2, there is a little bit of a shakeup, and they drop one spot. This is the Carolina Hurricanes, 2-1-1 on the week, 7-2-1 in their last 10. Still playing perfectly good hockey. But the team at number one kind of forced my hand with this one. 3-0 on the week, 9-1-0 in their last 10, and that's Florida. This team has looked lights out. Definitely do not want to catch these guys in the first round if you're one of those wild card spots in the East, which right now I think still belongs to Tampa, which holy smokes, that matchup would be unreal in the first round if we get Florida Tampa. So keeping my fingers crossed for that one. In general, though, the Panthers have been playing really strong hockey. Both Bob and Stolars look really good. Matt Tkachuk heating up really since the turn of the calendar year. Sam Reinhart still scoring at a ridiculous pace for a guy at his contract. Just all in all, there's nothing you can point out really that's a negative about this team. They've been playing fantastic for the last like 2.5 months really, but this last stretch has been really, really solid for them. They have not been at number one, I don't think, the entire year, and they've been deserving it for quite a bit. They finally get just enough of an edge over Carolina that they move up the one spot, and they are the number one team for this week. Again, the last week prior to the trade deadline. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Throw me some mock trades that you think are going to go down in the next week too. Very curious to see you guys' thought. What do you think your team needs? What do you think your team needs to get rid of? If you're a team that's in the mix like New Jersey, like Minnesota, like Seattle, like Nashville, what is your team doing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe as well if you really liked it. It is free. And we will talk to you guys tonight for the week recap and hopefully a lot over the next week with trade coverage. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks again for watching.